All right, welcome everyone. I have with us today Albert Quintana. He is a friend of our CALMA family, the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors, and I actually met him through that group. And he was so instrumental in giving me the opportunity to work with Paul Lane at KUHS Radio and do the interview with them. And so it's been a really great partnership. We've done book exchanges and learned a little bit more about his background as far as his family and his teaching background. And so got a lot of stuff to share with you today. And so I will just let him tell us a little bit more about where he's from and what his background is. So Albert, please tell us.
Well, my name is Albert Quintana. I'm a little bit older than most beginning authors. I just started back in 2003 when I wrote my first book. From Commerce City, Colorado, my friend Henry Archuleta, who you met through KUHSdenver.com. I call it the cradle of civilization because that's where I began my life, and he calls it the Holy Land because everything that we did holy was there. And 30-year teacher. Started at, I actually taught in the school district where I grew up, Monaco Elementary, Adams City Junior High, and Adams City High School. And then I went to the University of Northern Colorado. And I always wanted to write books, but I kind of walked out of when I was at graduation, and I said, well, you know what? I can't really write a book because I haven't really lived. If I'm going to write something, it's going to have to be about my life. And the most inspirational piece of that whole thing was my mother, because she would always tell us stories about growing up in Northern Colorado and facing discrimination and how she had to survive and how she was called a bunch of names and this, that, and the other, and how she got into a lot of fights and how she survived. And her stories were like priceless. She survived. She met my dad, who was a rancher from New Mexico, from Valladero, New Mexico, which is 53 miles east of Las Vegas. They met and they had me, and I grew up in that Commerce City area, which I felt was very good. Became a teacher later on because I didn't even really know what I wanted to do after I got out of college. But I had a great influencer, and it was Carlos Leal from UNC, University of Northern Colorado. He says, well, Albert, what was your best subject? And I told him social studies. And he looked me in the eye and said, Albert, you're going to be a social studies teacher. What? Yeah, social studies teacher. And you know what, Kimberly? I never looked back.
Wow.
I never looked back. And there was a lot of bumps and bruises on the way because when I got out of school, I was really immature. I didn't have that much experience. I pretty much had to do everything on my own research. And then I got married young. I got married when I was 20 years old. And my wife, eventually she became a teacher too, through some great programs. I don't know if you ever heard of the Bueno program.
No.
At the Colorado University. And she became a teacher. So there were two teachers. And the greatest thing that could ever happen with two teachers is you both had summers off. And guess what? Our kids had the best vacations.
Nice.
The best vacations. We've been all over Europe. We've been to Peru, Mexico City a couple of times. Of course, we did Disneyland, Disney World. And that's another thing that I was kind of thinking about is like, I would like to write a book about my travels because not too many people get out and go to Europe or go to South America. Okay. So that leads us to writing, correct?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I do have a couple of questions before we move on to that. First of all, where's your mom's family from? Because I know your dad's family's from northern New Mexico, and your mom?
Originally was from Windsor, Colorado.
Okay.
Migrant farm worker.
Okay.
All the crops. Grandpa Chacon. He was a Chacon. They were Chacons.
Okay.
They would not homestead. What's the sharecrop?
Okay.
They would sharecrop. They go in and they would contract doing an area that they would have to pick. One of the things that they picked was not necessarily picking, but they called it thinning beets. They would have to thin the beets for the big company, the big sugar company that was there. And Mom said that sometimes when they would move from one place to next, the place that they would stay was about as good as a shack.
Oh, wow.
So they would walk in, okay, just get in there, clean it up, and so don't open your suitcases yet because we might have to be moved to the next site. Wow. So that's the way they would move.
Just still a couple of more questions that I have about some of the things that you mentioned. First of all, and then we'll go into your writing, the subject that you taught. So did you end up teaching social studies? Was that the degree that you got?
I have a degree in social sciences. Yeah, I have a master's in bilingual multicultural education.
Okay, nice.
Older.
Nice.
83.
Okay.
Graduated from UNC in 1975.
Nice. And so 2 teachers in the family, and you guys just made an amazing life for your family out of it, with traveling in the summers. And it's definitely a great way to grow up and a great way to raise a family. But it's also not easy. I'm a teacher myself, so I know those 9 months that you are in the classroom are grueling and tough, and it's a lot of hard work. And so I'm sure those vacations were well deserved. And so the next question that kind of brings up your books is about your mom's family, and it kind of reminds me of some of the stories that I read in this book, The Crochet Lady, which I am absolutely loving. Have to confess, I'm not all the way done with it, but I think that's okay because I won't be able to give away the ending. I'm at the point where I'm really excited about hearing more about the Crochet Lady's Mount Blanca. And so she's a tough lady, just like it sounds like your mom was. She grew up as a lumberjack in the San Luis Valley near Capulin. And so it's such a heartwarming story that really speaks to the toughness of the people from El Valle, where I'm from. And so and the things that you had to do. And so just been a real treat to read it. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Crochet Lady and your inspiration behind it?
Well, the Crochet Lady was my mother-in-law. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I wrote about my mother-in-law. In her last day, she says, Albert, I want you to write a book about my story. And I said, okay. But the crazy thing, Kimberly, is that she went deaf in her last days. So there I was with a whiteboard and a pencil, whatever it's called, a pencil marker. Right marker, there you go. I would ask her a question. I'd write it down and I'd show it to her. And then she was able to, correspond verbally. So I said, okay, Ida, that was her name, Ida. Ida, tell me something about your life as a teenager. And she goes, what's mine? That was it. It was boring. So I had to gather little bits and pieces from doing that. And then I came up and I did a lot of interviews with her sisters and her people that had known her and her children, of course. And so from that promise, I wrote that book.
Well, it's a beautiful story. And when you talk about your mom having a lot of stories with your Chacon side of the family, this is obviously another one of those examples. Pantaleon and his adventures through northern New Mexico and becoming a sheep herder, and all of the trials that he went through, and just the idea that I can see her as a 90-year-old lady in the senior center, sharing these stories with all the people around her, and people just sort of being, just enthralled with her words and what she has to say. It just reminds me of being back home and hearing the stories of my own family as well, because that's, how we learned. That's they taught us lessons that way. They shared about their journeys with us, and that's how we were able to sort of move forward in our own lives and get the strength that we needed, to move forward in the things that we needed to do in our own journeys. And so I can just picture all of that happening in the book. And so, tell me a little bit more about that and her crocheting and, what that was like for her being in the senior center.
Well, it was really funny because when she first went to the senior center, she would go, it was a day program. So they would bring her home then during the day. So she was making all these little cositas, with her crochet and stuff. And she would go down and she'd go into the senior center and she was making it into a business. She was selling everything like $5 for this, $3 for this. So after a while, they shut her down,
Oh.
But what happened was they shut her down, and then she went to the house, and then all of a sudden she started doing this green lace crochet piece. You never get it correct. Tear it down. She never get it correct. And before you know it, she would just lay it down. And she didn't have that ability the dexterity, the finger thing. So she started doing little handicrafts, and which were a little bit easier to manipulate with her fingers.
She sounds like she was a force to be reckoned with. I mean, to start a business at the senior center, that's just classic. That's wonderful. And it just, again, speaks to her strength and her perseverance of everything that she had to go through. And so it's just, she's an inspiration, absolutely. And definitely, like I said, an example of the toughness of the women from back home.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the legend of Mount Blanca and how she was waiting for her Mount Blanca. I was really taken by that story, and I just thought that was a beautiful legend. And I'm a sucker for a romantic story and a love story. So, so if you could share with me a little bit more about that, and with the audience about how she was inspired by that story as well.
Well, she met with the chieftain that came into the classroom and gave him this beautiful story. And she was only like in first grade, I believe. And when she was in there, he told this beautiful story about Mount Blanca and White Mountain.
Yes.
White Mountain, and geez, I haven't read it for a long time now. The chief, the young brave, and they fell in love, and they died on the mountain. So what happened was, she comes home and she tells her mom this beautiful story. So during this whole time, she's asking God to give her the strength to wait for Mount Blanca in her life.
Aww.
And you know who that is, don't you?
I have an inkling that it's Pantaleon.
Yeah.
I haven't got there yet, but that's my hope.
And have you got to the point of the courthouse?
No, not yet. They're sheep herding and kind of afraid of Bigfoot, and they're looking for a couple of lost sheep at this point.
Yeah, I won't say anything.
Okay.
That's biblical or scriptural base to it, like the good shepherds looking for the lost sheep. There's, it's my background. Like I was part of the Denver Crucil movement for years.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I was the lay director, and we would put on retreats,
Mm.
and people would come to the Lord. So
Nice.
that's part of my background.
Well, yeah, that's wonderful. And I do see a lot of that. I do see the mention of the parallel between King Henry VIII and not being able to have sons with the Crochet Lady's family. And so how he decided he wanted this sawmill business. And if he said, if I'm not going to have boys, then my girls are going to do the work. And that's exactly what they did. And they went to the mountains, they cut the logs, they loaded them onto trucks, they brought them back down. She was a tough woman. And so it's an inspiration, to show young girls that you can do anything, even in the face of adversity, you can do whatever you want, and you can use whatever circumstances are in your life to persevere. And so that to me is a really big lesson to take from this. And I'm so glad that she asked you to tell her story, because this is the way that our families from generation to generation for years, for centuries, have sort of passed on wisdom. And, I was thinking about this the other day, and how, we could become a society of technology, and, we're all in our phones and, on our computers and doing all of these different things. And a lot of these stories don't get passed down the way that they used to. We don't necessarily sit around the table and talk this way, or in the evening, the TV takes up our time. And so I think this, the Crochet Lady, No More Green Chili, a lot of these books that I've come across through this CALMA group are exactly that. It's the wisdom of the stories of our gente, just pushing against this technologically driven society so that we could get that wisdom back out there. So I'm really excited that these stories are out there for the world to share. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about No More Green Chili. The title is awesome. It strikes me because I'm a foodie too, and so it makes me hungry to read it.
Well, the premise of No More Green Chili has to deal with my mom. I write stories about women, because women are very popular today in the literary world. So, but it just happened because probably the two biggest influencers in my life have been my mother-in-law and my mom. But Dad had died in 1984. And we were in the funeral mass. And I looked over and I saw Mom, and I said, geez, what's Mom gonna do now? Dad did everything. Dad did everything in the household. He didn't clean the house and all that, but he was like the bookkeeper and all that other stuff. And so I looked over at Mom, and oh wow, her self-esteem has been so low, because my dad was a severe alcoholic, and we had an angry house, a very loving house, but yet a very angry house because of the alcoholism. And I looked at Mom, and Dad had died, and I said, what am I going to do? So that's where I got the inspiration to write her story, to develop her self-esteem, to make her feel good about who she is, who she was, and who she will be in the future. Nice. So I wrote the story about her growing up, and I incorporated all the stories that she had told me when I was growing up. In addition, I interviewed my Uncle Gene, who was our older brother, and I interviewed her oldest sister, Lucy Apodaca, Eugene, Eugenio Chacon, and my mom. And so one of my biggest things is that I try to develop, like what you do, imagery. You have to see the scene. You have to see the book, like in your story, the book that they found with the Ladino information. Okay, so they have to see it. So I write the story, and it's about my grandpa Chacon, how he met his wife, Manuelita Duran. and how later on they had my mom and all the other kids. But in those days, they couldn't afford a ring, a diamond ring. So you know what they used? A
What?
rosary.
Ah.
A rosary. He had a silver rosary. A silver rosary that was the symbol of their love, of their marriage. And what's crazy about the whole thing is the rosary gets broken in half as he's preparing to try to marry Manuelita.
Oh no.
I know you haven't read it yet.
No.
But this is gonna be really enthralling. It's gonna really bring you into it. But I go on, and the thing with the green chili, I'll let you read about that later on, because a society without spice is not a society.
That's right.
That's chili.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to have a little bit of perk there.
Yeah. I'm already sort of enthralled because you talked about how no one makes green chili like your mom. And so I'm really excited to read a little bit more about that and what that means in the book. So yeah, thank you for sharing about that.
Find out about that, it's really, really crazy. But
yeah.
And also, the relationship between the chili picking and also the what am I trying to say here? What they did, they were feeding the world. The migrant farm worker is feeding the world as they are today.
Yeah.
And still aren't treated very good.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know. And it's such a travesty. I also think about, when you think about chili, it's a comfort food, and it brings back nostalgia. When the home is filled with that smell of roasting chili in the oven, I love that smell, and it just takes me back to when I was a kid as well. And so, yeah, there's so many different elements, I think, that are represented when you think about Chile. Well, a couple of other things. I'm curious, kind of want to go back to teaching, and I know you've done a lot. You're not just a writer, or you haven't just been a teacher, you've also been a radio host, and I know that through your teaching, you were also Teacher of the Year 1 year. So can you tell us a little bit about all of the other hats that you've worn, and what that accomplishment meant to you to get that award?
Well, that's going to be my next book.
Nice.
My next book is going to be titled Get on the Bus.
Mm.
Get on the bus. And it's about what teachers go through. We get slammed a lot. We go through a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of nonsense that takes place, and get on the bus or else the bus is leaving. I had one principal tell me that one time. Better get on the bus because the bus is leaving. And I said, well, first of all, I need to know where the bus is going.
Right, exactly.
I'm a smart aleck, so I just it wasn't a very good experience for me. Teacher of the Year was my goal. It actually wasn't my goal. It just happened to be. It just happened to be one of the things that I was able to accomplish. Because first of all, I started at Adams City High School, taught there for 4 or 5 years. We had a reduction in enrollment, so they transferred me to the middle school. They had an affirmative action program, and I was supposed to stay at the high school because of the affirmative action program. And they overrode it, and I kind of went through some legalities with that. So I ended up going to Kearney Middle School in Commerce City, same city. And I had a great experience. Taught social studies. The kids loved me. I also coached wrestling. I was the head wrestling coach there, and we had some championships. But then I ran into that principal that I was telling you about, who gave me a hard time about not getting on the bus.
Wow.
So I transferred to the hardest job anybody could ever have in teaching.
Mm.
I transferred to a program, an at-risk program for middle school kids called Burger Academy of the Rockies.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? You broke up a little bit.
Burger King Academy of the Rockies.
Hmm.
And it was a program during that time where all these corporations were trying to, trying to show their support of the public school system. So I taught there for 4 years, and it was the roughest job ever. Some of these kids were homeless. Some of the students came from battered families, drug addicts, and I couldn't do it anymore. I had a lot of influence. I thought I did my job to the best. So then the program dismantled. There was no more funding, and I went into the same, because it was housed at Adams City Junior High, middle school at that time. And I told the principal there I want to transfer to the 7th grade. I taught 7th grade for 1 year, and it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life. And I love the kids. They love me. We did some great things. Kids were awesome. Then I had an opportunity to go back to the high school for my last 6 years. It was like going to heaven.
Wow.
I was in heaven teaching. It was so in 2001, my name was submitted as Teacher of the Year, along with, it was co-Teachers of the Year. Mm-hmm. Another teacher got it too, Mr. Mitch Martinez, and then there was Albert Quintana. And that was my plight. That was my goal.
Nice.
And after I left there, that's retired in 2003. I retired when I was 50.
Wow.
Did you make it? My wife retired when she was 50.
That's great. Wonderful. So I have a question. What do you think was the catalyst for you and your colleague getting the co-teacher of the year that year? What was the magic? Can you explain a little bit about what that was with those kids that particular year?
Kids were going to school, so the attendance rate went up. The grades were awesome. CSAP, do you guys still have CSAP?
Well, it's a different acronym, but yeah, standardized test.
CSAP scores were good in our classes, and we had recommendations from other teachers. And that's why I was able to become Teacher of the Year 2001.
What do you think made the difference? Was it the teaching style? Was it the chemistry that you had with the kids? Was it just that they were willing to learn? Or were there strategies that you had implemented that you learned from someplace that you think made the difference? What do you think was the
best thing was making kids feel welcome in the classroom. Mm. There's no fear of any kind of outside distraction. My classroom was a safe zone. I always would, before every classroom, I would always say a prayer for my students. I looked at my teaching, my classes, and my whole education thing as a ministry. I really did. And my wife used to do the same thing. She would put holy water on everybody's seat in their classroom, and she would make the sign of the cross. So I don't know. It's just like I think I'm a funny guy. I make it. I used to always tell a joke right before class started, and the kids would just get enthralled. They would just really love it. And sometimes they would take me off task because I can bird walk sometimes. And did you ever get off task?
Did I?
Yeah.
Never. Are you kidding? Not me.
Yeah. Awesome being able to relate to,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it has a lot to do with my personality. I'm fun. I laugh, I share stories.
Mhm.
And that would bring kids in.
Yeah.
I had one parent that said one time that, what are you doing, Mr. Q, with my son? He's waking up early. He's waking up at 5:30 in the morning so he could be to your first hour class at 7.
Nice.
Never done that. Oh man, that really built my ego up.
Well, and I think that's what it's all about. It's seeing that light bulb light up in a kid's eyes, and it's seeing that turnaround. So I can definitely understand that. How that just made you come alive, and it makes everything that you do worth it, in my opinion. So
it feels so good. Kids' light bulbs go off. Light bulbs go off. That's a treasure.
it is.
Priceless.
Well, the last thing I wanted to ask is, some advice that you received along the way, or advice that you have sort of adopted for yourself along the way that you might give anybody that would want to follow in your footsteps, either as a writer or as a coach, or in your faith, because I see that as a theme actually throughout your books and even in this interview. So please share some advice that you'd like to give for that person that's sitting here listening to us talking right now and wondering, what their next move should be.
Well, I had a cousin that called me up and she said, "Hey, Albert, I want to know if I like to write my own autobiography." And I said, well, the first thing you do is you get a piece of paper, you put your name in the middle of the paper and circle it. Then you do like a diagram or some sort of visual, and you have arrows coming out like an octopus or like rays, and you say on every line you put down one episode in your life. And then you write 2 episodes in your life. So it might start like your birth. It might be elementary school. It might be middle school, high school, your dates, your romances, funny situations that made you laugh. Hard times. Another one. Marriages, children, vacations. Could be any of those. That's my advice if you want to write. And then talk to people. Research it. Go back and talk to I don't know if I'm saying this, ancianos, is that how you say it? The older people? Because they have great stories.
Yes, absolutely.
Great stories. And one of the things that came out in my interview was like, with Ida, the crochet lady, is a lot of these people didn't know this. Because sometimes she's telling these stories to their kids and they're not even listening to what she's saying, what Pantaleon was saying. And here I was, because I love stories. I could be in a room with Pantaleon when he was living, and he's with me with my limited Spanish and Pantaleon with his limited English. We communicated. Yeah. And I know you speak Spanish. You were brought up in a Spanish-speaking home.
I was not.
Oh, you weren't? Okay.
No, my parents got in trouble for speaking Spanish in school, so they didn't teach my brother and I. I did hear it from my parents when they were speaking to my grandparents, or the older tios and tias and stuff like that. And I did hear it all around me, more Spanglish than anything. But yeah, I learned it in school, and I learned it in college. I went to Spain for 4 months and spent study abroad trip out there, and just, you know, tried to practice as much as I can, because I see it. It's a way of knowing, you know, it's a way of perceiving the world when you can speak the language. So for me, it was important.
Well, it's kind of like the goal of Commerce City was assimilation. Mm-hmm. We were all to assimilate. They used to always call me Albert Quintana. Albert Quintana. Then my dad would say, Joe Quintana. So then when I started going to college, and I was like in Mecha and UMass, I was Albert Quintana.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories with me, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview and telling me a little bit more about your family, your works. And so now, just if you could please share with us where we can find The Crochet Lady, No More Green Chili, and so we could get these stories out. I think one of the things that you mentioned was, you know, the younger generation not necessarily listening to some of the stories that the older generation has to say. And I think sometimes that happens, but I'm really glad again that we are putting these stories into book form, because there are people that are just, you know, eager to get these stories and to read them and to gain wisdom from them. And so yeah, thank you for putting them out there. And please let us know where we can purchase them, where we can get your books.
Did you see this one?
No, which one is that?
This is my first book. It's A Teacher Grows Up in Commerce City.
Okay. So you've got 3.
I have 3 books.
Find them.
What's that?
Where can we find them?
Okay. You can find them on quintanareads.com.
Okay.
That's my website. I'm changing, I'm rebranding this book.
Which book is that? The Crochet Lady?
It's gonna go out. It's being published by Paper Chase. So that's gonna be Amazon.com.
Okay.
And The Teacher Grows Up, No More Green Chili will still be with authorhouse.com. Authorhouse.com.
Okay, so we've got 3 ways to get your books: authorhouse.com, quintanareads.com, and Amazon pretty soon with The Crochet Lady. So thank you so much for being a part of this project, and best of luck to you and your family, and keep the stories coming.
Okay, hidden history.
Yeah. Definitely.
We're the creators of the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful weekend.
God bless you.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you everybody for watching. This has been a La Gente Legacy production and successful in the SLV and CALMA series. Stay tuned for new and improved work from La Gente Legacy in the upcoming new year, 2021. Woohoo! Happy holidays to you and yours. Merry Christmas and take good care. Stay safe. Until next year. Bye-bye.